What happens when someone reads their dying father's final words on live television, and even Dr. Phil can't hold back his tears? The envelope sat on the small table between them, worn, creased, yellowed with time. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for it. Dr. Phil, who had heard thousands of stories over 20 years, suddenly looked different. His eyes glistened. His voice cracked. "Take your time," he whispered. What happened next would stop production, silence a studio of 300 people, and create a moment that would be replayed millions of times around the world. But to understand why this moment shattered everyone in that room, we need to go back to how Sarah ended up on that stage. 3 months earlier, Sarah Mitchell had sent a desperate email to the Dr. Phil show. Subject line: "I never got to say goodbye." Her father, Robert Mitchell, had died suddenly from a heart attack while Sarah was overseas on a work assignment. She received the call at 3 a.m. in a Tokyo hotel room. By the time she flew back, 14 hours later, her father was already gone. "I never got to tell him I loved him one last time," Sarah had written in her application. "I never got to thank him for everything. I never got to say goodbye." The Dr. Phil producers had seen thousands of applications, but something about Sarah's story hit differently. It wasn't dramatic in the traditional sense. No addiction, no betrayal, no scandal. Just pure, raw grief. The kind that millions of people carry silently every day. When Sarah walked onto the stage that Tuesday afternoon, she looked exactly like someone drowning in unprocessed grief. Dark circles under her eyes. A forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hands that couldn't stay still. Dr. Phil greeted her with his characteristic warmth, but also something else, a softness that his longtime viewers recognized. This wasn't going to be a typical episode. "Sarah, thank you for being here," Dr. Phil began. "I know this isn't easy." Sarah nodded, already fighting tears. I need help. I don't know how to move forward when I never got closure." Dr. Phil leaned forward, and something in his expression changed. The audience sensed it immediately. "Sarah, before we go any further, I need to ask you something." Dr. Phil's voice had dropped lower, more intimate. "When was the last time you spoke to your father?" 2 days before he died." Sarah's voice broke. "We had a phone call. I was complaining about work stress. He listened, like he always did. I told him I'd call him when I got back. I never did." The silence in the studio was absolute. 300 people held their breath. "And you've been carrying that guilt for 8 months," Dr. Phil stated. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, tears streaming freely now. "Every single day. I replay that conversation. I should have told him I loved him. I should have said thank you. I should have. Stop the tape. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a command. The cameras kept rolling, but everyone froze. This wasn't scripted. Dr. Phil stood up, walked off the stage, and disappeared into the wings. The audience exchanged confused glances. Sarah sat alone on stage, looking lost. 30 seconds passed. The longest 30 seconds in the show's history. When Dr. Phil returned, he was carrying something. A manila folder. His expression was unreadable. "Sarah," he sat back down. "Before you came here today, our team did something. With your mother's permission, we went through your father's belongings." Sarah's eyes widened. "What?" "Your mother told us that in the weeks before he died, your father had been writing letters to you." The audience gasped. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil opened the folder and pulled out an envelope. It was worn, the edges soft from being handled repeatedly. Sarah recognized her name written in her father's distinctive handwriting on the front. "Your father wrote this 3 days before he passed." Dr. Phil's voice was thick with emotion. "Your mother found it in his office drawer. He'd written several drafts. This was the final one." Sarah couldn't speak. She just stared at the envelope like it was both the most precious and most terrifying thing in the world. Do you want to read it? Dr. Phil asked gently. You don't have to do it here. You can take it home. No. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I need to. I need to know. Dr. Phil handed her the envelope. The cameras zoomed in as Sarah's shaking fingers opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded carefully. Her father's handwriting filled both sides. The studio was so quiet you could hear the rustle of paper as Sarah unfolded the letter. She began to read silently, her eyes moving across the lines. 5 seconds in, her shoulders started shaking. 10 seconds in, tears dripped onto the paper. 15 seconds in, she pressed the letter to her chest and sobbed. Dr. Phil did something then that he'd never done in 20 years of television. He stood up, walked over to Sarah, and knelt beside her chair. Not as a TV host. As a human being witnessing another human being's pain. Can you read it out loud? He asked softly. Only if you want to. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. Her voice was broken, but she began. My dearest Sarah. She had to stop. Breathe. Continue. I'm writing this at 2 a.m. because I can't sleep. I've been thinking about all the things I want you to know, and I realize I've never been good at saying them out loud. The audience was already reaching for tissues. You were born on the rainiest night of the year. The hospital lost power, and the backup generators were flickering. Your mother was scared, but I held her hand and told her everything would be okay. And then you arrived, screaming at the top of your lungs, and I knew. Sarah's voice broke completely. She couldn't continue. Dr. Phil's eyes were filled with tears. He didn't try to hide them. The cameras captured what happened next, a moment that would become one of the most shared clips in television history. Dr. Phil reached out and gently took the letter from Sarah's trembling hands. He looked at her, asking silent permission. She nodded. Dr. Phil began to read, his voice steady but thick with emotion. I knew in that moment that my whole life had been leading to you. Every choice, every mistake, every triumph, it was all so I could be your father. He paused, collecting himself. Sarah, I need you to know something. Are you listening? This is important. Dr. Phil's voice cracked reading the next line. You don't owe me anything. Not gratitude, not phone calls, not visits. You don't owe me your time or your energy. Because being your dad was never a burden. It was the greatest privilege of my life. The entire studio was crying now. Crew members behind cameras wiped their eyes. The sound engineer's shoulders shook. A cameraman had to step back. I know you work so hard. I know you push yourself. I know you feel guilty when you don't call enough. Dr. Phil continued reading, his professional composure completely gone now. But sweetheart, I want you to stop. Stop feeling guilty. Stop thinking you didn't do enough. You did everything right. You became exactly who I hoped you'd become, strong, independent, kind, brave. What Dr. Phil read next would change Sarah's life forever. I need to tell you something else, baby girl. I'm scared. My doctor says my heart isn't what it used to be. I didn't want to worry you, but I need you to know this. If something happens to me, if I'm not there anymore, I need you to promise me something. Dr. Phil had to stop. He looked at Sarah, whose face was buried in her hands, then back at the letter. Promise me you'll forgive yourself for not being there. Promise me you'll stop replaying our last conversation, wishing you'd said different words. Because Sarah, I heard everything you didn't say. I heard I love you in every complaint about work. I heard thank you in every story you shared. I heard goodbye in every talk to you soon. The silence that followed was sacred. The kind of silence that only happens when something profound has just occurred. Dr. Phil's voice was barely holding together. A father knows his daughter's heart. And your heart, Sarah, has been saying I love you your entire life. I heard it. I heard every word. No one in that studio, or watching at home, was prepared for what the letter said next. Dr. Phil continued, tears now openly streaming down his face. So here's what I need you to do. When I'm gone, and I will be gone someday, whether it's tomorrow or 20 years from now, I need you to live. Really live. Don't half-live because you're carrying guilt. Don't dim your light because you think that's what grief looks like. Grief looks like love with nowhere to go. So give that love to yourself. Give it to your future children. Give it to the world. The camera cut to the audience. Every single person was crying. A woman in the front row had her hand over her heart. An elderly man in the back row had tears streaming into his beard. I love you, Sarah. I loved you the moment you were born, and I'll love you long after I'm gone. And whenever you miss me, just look in the mirror. You have my eyes, my smile, my stubborn streak. I'm right there. Always. Dr. Phil's voice broke on the last line. Your father, forever and always. Dad. The studio sat in complete silence for 15 seconds. 15 eternal seconds. Then Sarah stood up, walked over to Dr. Phil, and collapsed into his arms. He held her while she sobbed, not the polite, quiet crying of television, but the deep, guttural sobs of 8 months of grief finally being released. The audience stood. Every single person. Not to applaud, that would have been wrong. They stood in witness. In solidarity. In shared humanity. Dr. Phil held Sarah and whispered something the microphones barely caught. He knew, sweetheart. He knew. After what felt like hours but was probably 2 minutes, Sarah pulled back. Her face was red and swollen, but something had changed in her eyes. Something had shifted. He was scared, she said, her voice hoarse. He knew something might happen. And he still used his last energy to make sure I'd be okay. Dr. Phil nodded. That's what great parents do. They love you even when they're not here. But Dr. Phil wasn't done. He made a choice that would impact Sarah's life forever. Stop the production, Dr. Phil said to his producers. I need 10 minutes. The cameras stopped rolling for the first time in the show's history during an active segment. What happened in those 10 minutes was never aired, never recorded, never shared publicly. But later, Sarah would tell friends that in those 10 minutes, Dr. Phil connected her with grief counselors, trauma specialists, and a support group for people dealing with sudden loss. He personally wrote down phone numbers. He made calls right there, on stage, coordinating her first therapy appointment. When the cameras rolled again, Dr. Phil spoke directly to the lens. If you're watching this at home, and you've lost someone without getting to say goodbye, I want you to hear this. They knew. Whatever you didn't get to say, they knew. The love wasn't in the last words, it was in the lifetime before them. He turned back to Sarah. Your father's letter wasn't about giving you permission to grieve. It was about giving you permission to live. Can you do that for him? Sarah nodded, clutching the letter to her chest. I can try. That's all he wanted, Dr. Phil said softly. For you to try. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The episode aired 3 weeks later. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed 47 million times online. The comment section was flooded with people sharing their own stories of unspoken goodbyes, of guilt they'd been carrying, of letters they wished they'd written or received. The hashtag letter to my parent trended worldwide. Thousands of people began writing letters to their living parents, saying the things they'd been putting off. Thousands more wrote letters to parents who'd passed, finally releasing words that had been trapped inside. Grief counselors reported a 300% increase in appointments. Therapy apps crashed from overwhelming demand. The simple act of one daughter reading her father's letter had opened a floodgate of collective grief and healing. 3 months after the episode aired, Sarah sent Dr. Phil a letter of her own. She wrote about how she'd started therapy. How she joined a grief support group. How she'd begun volunteering at a hospice, helping other people say the things they needed to say before it was too late. Your show gave me back my father's final gift, Sarah wrote. But more than that, it gave me back myself. I was drowning in guilt, and you threw me a lifeline made of his own words. I can breathe again. Dr. Phil kept that letter in his office. Years later, in interviews, he would say that Sarah's episode was the one that reminded him why he did this work. Television can be entertainment, he told Oprah in a rare interview. But it can also be healing. Sarah needed to hear her father's words. But I think America needed to hear them too. We all carry guilt about words unsaid. Her father gave all of us permission to let it go. The letter itself became something more than paper and ink. Sarah had it professionally preserved and framed. But she also had copies made, not to distribute, but to carry. One in her purse. One in her car. One beside her bed. On hard days, she'd read it. Her father's words became a compass when she felt lost. She started a foundation called Letters Never Sent, helping people preserve important correspondence from loved ones and encouraging families to express their feelings before it's too late. Within 2 years, the foundation had helped over 10,000 families. 5 years after the episode, Sarah returned to Dr. Phil's show. She walked onto that same stage, sat in that same chair, but she was transformed. "I came back to say thank you," she told Dr. Phil. "And to tell everyone watching, if you have unfinished business with someone, finish it. If you love someone, tell them. The perfect moment is now." Dr. Phil smiled. "Your father would be proud of who you've become." "He made me who I am," Sarah replied. "His letter didn't just give me closure. It gave me purpose." The legacy continues. Sarah's episode inspired over 2 million conversations between parents and children. The hashtag letter to my parent became a movement. Grief counselors reported unprecedented demand for services. That worn envelope became a symbol. Our words outlive us. Love doesn't end with death. And sometimes the most powerful gift is permission to live without guilt. Dr. Phil later said it was his most important episode, not because of ratings, but because it reminded everyone of a simple truth. Say it now. Whatever you need to say to the people you love, say it now. Don't wait for someday. Today is still here. And that's a message worth remembering forever.